Today we're going to be talking about JIF peanut butter and the rebrand that our group decided to do. For our introduction, we are aiming to test whether a rebrand of JIF peanut butter will positively impact the customer's perception of the current brand. In our presentation, we're going to go over the 2x2 design and discuss how each independent variable was manipulated, how the dependent variable was measured, and the covariates. Talk about our main results and what we found from our survey and statistical testing, any actionable implications. So what should JIF peanut butter decide to do moving forward? And then any interesting findings through graphs and figures.
All right, so starting off with the 2x2 design, we're going to quickly run through how each independent variable was manipulated, how the dependent variable was measured, as well as any covariates in our study. So starting off with the independent variables, we're first going to talk about what the original packaging had. So the original color was tricolor background with white letters, and the original graphic was a nutritional fact sticker. So moving to the things that we changed, the new color was a white background with colorful letters, and the new graphic was kids eating peanut butter. So the dependent variables, we were aiming to measure how variations in the redesigned JIF logo affect the consumer's interest in purchasing the product. So some sample questions we have that we measured is, what is the most you pay? Respondents answered with an open-ended format where they were able to input the price that they would be willing to pay. What is your opinion on JIF? We just did a 5-point scale on this one for them to rate from low to high their opinion. What are your emotions in peanut butter? On this one, we included a smiley face slider with 5 choices ranging from happy to sad for them to display their answer. And then the last one was, how healthy is this product, where respondents were to answer on a 7-point scale, whether they believe it was unhealthy or very healthy. As for covariates, some things that we also measured in this study that could affect our results were basic demographics. So these include things like age, gender, etc. The peanut butter type that people consumed could play a difference. So creamy, crunchy, natural, processed. A lot of people prefer different types of peanut butter, and we believe that could make a difference in their reactions. Family dynamics definitely change things. So kids, how many people live in the household, other things like that. And then lastly, we have food consumption. So what other foods or beverages are consumed with peanut butter? So things like jelly, bread, crackers, anything like that.
Next, we're going to talk about our main results. So what did we find from our survey and our statistical testing? So from our survey, we were able to pull some demographics. So 51% of our respondents were single, 42% were married, and then 7% were another category. We had 57 females, 101 males, and then one decided not to say. A majority of our respondents were approximately 25 years old. And then on average, we had 4 people living in each household.
We found 4 different simple effects during our analysis correlating to the willingness to pay of the participants and the different peanut butter graphics shown to each participant. When looking at the graphics with the children, but the participants were shown different color variations, we see that there was a slight increase in willingness to pay for the multicolor graphic with the children. However, when looking at the p-value, we see that this difference is not significant because the p-value is 0.3. Next, we will be looking at when the children are not present, but the nutrition graphic is shown with the same different color variations. We again see a slight increase in willingness to pay for the multicolor graphic. However, this difference is not significant because of the p-value 0.4. Next, we will be looking at the same multicolor scheme, but with the children's graphics either presented or not presented. We see that there's a slight increase in willingness to pay for the graphic with the kids. However, once again, this is not a significant difference because of the p-value 0.65. Finally, we will be looking at the white color scheme and the same thing as the last one, with and without the children's graphics. We see a very slight increase in willingness to pay for the graphic displaying the kids, but once again, there was no significant difference because of the p-value 0.87. Overall, we found increases in willingness to pay through the participants, but all of our analysis led to a high p-value, making those changes not significant.
Okay, so next we're going to be talking about our main effects. So to visually summarize our 2x2, we focused on the dependent variable of willingness to pay for the JIF peanut butter. We ran hypothesis testing to assess the significance of the main and interaction effects. So to start off, for the baseline or the average willingness to pay of the respondents, it was $8.55. Looking at the first main effect, we specifically focused on the multicolored background being presented. This increased by 55 cents of the willingness to pay of the consumer. But looking at the p-value, the difference was not significant as it was too high at 0.18. We could possibly make the conclusion that it was moderately significant. For our second main effect, this was looking at the presence of the children's graphic on the peanut butter. This increased the willingness to pay slightly by 19 cents. This difference was again not significant as the p-value was too high at 0.65. Next, looking at our interaction effect, we were able to analyze these two factors together. So in the presence of the children's graphic as well as the multicolored background on the peanut butter, there was an increase only by 9 cents to 10 cents. Looking at the p-value, the difference was not significant with 0.82. So in conclusion, this means that there is no significance in this interaction.
We have come up with some actionable implications and recommendations for what JIF should do. So our overall goal was to improve the perception of JIF peanut butter taste and flavor among consumers using rebranding efforts. These are kind of the two little pathways we would go down depending on if we found significance or no significance between the independent and dependent variables. So a final recommendation, since we did not find any significance, is that JIF should not rebrand and they should not change their label because it did not seem to have a strong change in the consumer perception, and so it would just kind of be a waste. And they should reconsider its strategy and explore other ways to improve product perception.
Moving forward, we're going to talk about the interesting findings. So this was all the extra information that the survey showed us. So first up, we have income versus peanut butter consumption. So those with income less than $10,000 eat significantly more peanut butter than everyone else. We also have convenience versus JIF. So people who like JIF the most care most about convenience, where those who don't like JIF care the least about convenience. Next up, we have taste versus JIF. So those who care the least for JIF care the most about taste, where those who care the most for JIF care the second most about taste. We also found gender versus convenience. Convenience didn't really play a huge factor between the female and male gender, so there wasn't a big significance there. We also had diet versus JIF. So those who care the least about JIF care the most about dietary restriction, and those who care the most about JIF have the second highest concern for dietary restriction. So in terms of JIF, it doesn't really seem like JIF falls on the healthy end of the spectrum for a peanut butter product. We also had children versus diet. So those with children care more about peanut butter, meaning dietary restrictions, than those without kids. And then we have gender versus consumption. So males eat slightly more peanut butter than females do. And we also had healthiness displayed across the United States. So Kentucky, Oregon, and Kansas think JIF peanut butter isn't healthy, or North Carolina, Washington, and Texas think that JIF peanut butter is healthy. So this could be based on maybe the different products of peanut butter that they have in different states. And then we also have convenience displayed. So Washington, Kansas, North Carolina care the most about convenience when buying peanut butter, and Missouri cares the least about convenience.
Okay, next we did a cluster analysis on the results from our survey, and we put in a couple of different variables to get the clusters. So for the first cluster, we labeled them as young parents, as they cared about health, they really liked texture, they had children, and they thought that it was the most appetizing, and they were approximately about 32 years old. The next cluster, we labeled them as granola young adults. They really cared about their health. They thought that peanut butter was healthy. They pay the most for peanut butter, and they were approximately around 27 years old. The next cluster, they just didn't really like peanut butter in general. They thought that peanut butter was the least appealing, the least healthy, and they'd pay the least for peanut butter. But it was interesting because this group was actually the oldest group. The last cluster, we labeled them as confused young people because they were all over the maps. They thought it was appealing. They had the least texture. Children didn't like it. They thought it was the least creamy and the most unappetizing. So they were kind of all over the place for this cluster group.
In conclusion, today we've talked about the 2x2 design that we created for JIF peanut butter for their rebranding. After launching the survey on Amazon MTurk, we were able to analyze some demographic distribution, some simple domain, and interaction effects. In the end, we were able to come up with recommendations, and finally, we analyzed the different clusters of our respondents and their preferences. Thank you.